We're diving into a really big one, a highly anticipated and frankly pretty complex legal case.
Yeah.
The federal trial verdict of Sean Diddy Combs.
Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack here.
Absolutely. So our mission for you is to, cut through all the noise, pull out the key insights from everything we've looked at, and give you a real shortcut to understanding what actually happened and what it means going forward. Get ready because we're going to explore the surprising nuances of this mixed verdict. It's really sparked a lot of debate.
It really has.
So let's jump right in. What was the actual verdict? It came down July 2nd, 2025, right? After that long 7-week trial.
That's right. The jury, they delivered a split verdict, and that's pretty significant in itself. Combs was cleared of the most serious counts, things like racketeering, conspiracy, and, crucially, sex trafficking.
Okay, so cleared on those.
Right. But, and this is the key part, he was found guilty on 2 counts of transportation for the purpose of prostitution. These are violations of the Mann Act. That's an old federal law, over a century old, basically making it illegal to transport people across state lines for immoral purposes, which includes prostitution.
That's a really critical distinction, isn't it? Transportation versus trafficking.
Exactly. Very different legal standards.
So, okay, with this verdict now in, what does it mean for Combs, like, right now, immediately?
Well, each of those 2 Mann Act counts, they carry up to 10 years in prison.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, prosecutors have actually requested a combined sentence of around 51 months, so significantly less than the max.
Yeah.
But he's still in federal custody until sentencing.
And sentencing is when?
Tentatively set for October 3rd, 2025. And bail was denied. That was largely due to the seriousness of these convictions and also evidence of past domestic violence that came up during the trial.
Okay, so beyond Combs himself, this verdict has, well, much bigger ripples, doesn't it? Let's look at the pros, maybe. What are some positives people see in this outcome?
Definitely. I mean, on one hand, the conviction on these Mann Act counts, it sends a clear signal. High-profile figures can be held accountable for this kind of activity, facilitating prostitution across state lines. That sets a precedent.
Right.
It also sort of shows a federal willingness to go after powerful people in entertainment, which kind of reinforces those broader #MeToo goals of accountability. And importantly for many, even victims whose stories weren't part of the formal charges, they might feel their experiences or similar experiences testified about were seen as credible by the jury. That's significant.
But like any big case, there's another side. What about the criticisms, the cons?
And this is where it gets, really debated. Critics will argue that the acquittals on the big charges, trafficking and racketeering, that was a missed opportunity, a chance maybe to dismantle what was alleged to be a coercive network.
Right, the systemic aspect.
Exactly. And it raises questions, frankly, about jury comprehension. Did they fully get the difference between trafficking, which really requires proving coercion, force, fraud,
A higher bar.
a much higher bar, versus transportation, which is narrower? It's just about the act of moving someone for prostitution, whether they seemed coerced or not at that moment.
Yeah.
It's a subtle legal line.
I can see how that could be confusing.
Yeah, and some worry that just getting convictions on those 2 transportation counts, well, maybe it doesn't send a strong enough deterrent message. Does it undermine confidence that, wealthy defendants face the same justice? That's a concern you hear.
And we have to talk about Cassie Ventura, his former partner, right? She was so central to this.
Oh, absolutely. Cassie Ventura was undoubtedly a star witness for the prosecution. She gave some harrowing details about alleged abuse, coercive drug use, these escort-style parties. Her testimony was seen as vital.
But there was pushback on her testimony, too.
There was. Some critics tried to frame it as being motivated by her own pending civil lawsuit against him. And her public statements, like urging the judge to deny bail, they definitely fueled both a lot of sympathy for her, but also some skepticism from others.
It's just fascinating how quickly the public reaction, the industry reaction has played out. What have you seen there?
Well, we've seen brands, collaborators starting to quietly, sometimes not so quietly, distance themselves. Several artists have put joint projects on hold. His comeback chances seem pretty dim right now. And then there's a whole public discourse, which has been intense. You had things like the Free Puff campaign, supporters like Kanye West defending him very publicly.
Right, I saw that.
And that clashes directly with a lot of media coverage and even, weirdly, AI commentary. And you can't ignore the relentless snark, let's call it, from people like 50 Cent, which, sometimes that kind of commentary can muddy the public's grasp of the actual facts.
Yeah, it becomes its own narrative. So looking ahead then, What's next? Sentencing, obviously, but what else?
Right. Sensing in October is key. Character witnesses could play a role there. But beyond that, there's even been, believe it or not, talk of a potential presidential pardon from former President Trump. Yeah, though figures like 50 Cent are already publicly saying they'll fight against that. But maybe more importantly, legally speaking, there are dozens of separate civil lawsuits alleging sexual assault still pending against Combs.
And this conviction could impact those.
Hugely. A criminal conviction, even on lesser charges, can potentially make it much easier for plaintiffs in those civil cases to prove their claims.
Interesting.
And just as a side note for anyone wanting to track this, that 50 Cent produced Netflix docuseries about the allegations that's apparently still in the works and highly anticipated.
Wow. So this deep dive, it really shows the Combs trial is, well, it's a milestone in some ways for federal prosecution, but also just a stark reminder of how incredibly complex these abuse allegations are, especially with famous people involved.
Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating, I think, is how the next few months and maybe years will shape the final story here. You've got the sentencing, potential appeals, all those civil suits playing out, and how the media continues to frame it all. That combination will really determine the lasting impact on the law, on entertainment culture, and maybe most importantly, on victim advocacy. It feels like this story is really far from over.
Definitely one to keep watching. Thanks for breaking that down.
My pleasure. It's certainly a significant case.